I would say that the resurrection of the sacred feminine energy within us and the ability to lead with care is primary. And so I put that first, and that's the Venus cycle, dance with the sun. And it's going to be so connected to our deepest soul level service. There's no way around it at this point. It's that life, initiation, death, and rebirth. And that loop from the death transformation to the rebirth is really important right now because the whole culture is dying. The whole dominator, the whole structure is dying. So we need those mentors. We need those leaders that can then say, yes, it's all crumbling. And I can feel in my center, I'm being guided by this deeper, loving energy, mother energy, primordial energy of creation. And I'm moving into the next step of the rebirth and the regeneration, the regenerative culture.
Yeah, to actually believe in the new earth rather than just talk about it.
There's something about looking into our world and seeing what does it mean to regenerate my culture. And maybe that's just within your own family. Maybe that's on your team. There's something to be of service for each of us. Once we know what that leadership is and what we're initiating, it's like we are the new elders. We are the wise ones here.
This is the Miracle Zone. Welcome to another episode of the Miracle Zone podcast. I'm so excited today to be here with Sasha Rose, who is one of my mentors and one of my dear guides and beloved women that I look up to support me to be in my miracle zone. And so I'm excited that she's one of the first guests that we have on the podcast. And this is a really timely discussion that we're going to be having today. So make yourself a little tea, come a little closer, and we're going to dive in. And Sasha, I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, but just for a little bit of context for everybody who's watching, who might not know Sasha and her amazing teaching. Sasha is a very seasoned astrologer who's been there, done that in all the ways, and has really been spending over a decade now supporting other visionary women, entrepreneurs, and leaders to lead with their Venus cycle and use Venus wisdom to make beautiful headway on their heroine's journey of what they're here to deliver here in these times. And Sasha, I'm just going to let you introduce your voice into this space and tell us a little bit more about yourself before we dive in.
Thank you, Katerina. I'm so glad to be here in this very potent time. So yeah, I happened upon the Venus cycle. I knew nothing about the Venus cycle until 2012. I had studied astrology, but I didn't know there was a cycle, didn't know what that meant. And so I got taken on this journey after watching Venus cross the face of the sun with my own eyes in 2012, the summer. And that was the last time in our life that we could actually see that event. It only happens once every 200 years. So I caught that, and I caught this calling to see how that movement of Venus with the sun in relationship to the earth and the moon actually is this template for the awakening of the sacred feminine on the planet for the age of Aquarius. So I like to say that Venus is the golden key to the age of Aquarius. And so I've just been on this path ever since, deepening into what does that mean? What is this Venus design? How can that guide me? How can that support me to be more of who I am and show up in leadership at this time? And then have those cosmic energies also support that empathetic leadership where we're actually leading from our feminine. We're not just coming in with our masculine energy to be leaders, but we're actually coming into deep relationship in service as leaders.
When you said empathetic leadership, my whole body was like, oh, I had a beautiful exhale. So thank you. Thank you for that. And I wanted to invite you and just to share with the listeners as well. So I'm no astrologer, though I do think very much through my embodiment with what's happening in the cosmos. Oftentimes I'll feel it in my body and then I'll be like very curious, what's this? And then I'll go check it out and it all makes sense. And I was working a lot with the cycles of the moon, and that was really supportive for me until I found Sasha's work. And then I started orienting more towards syncing with Venus. And so I wanted Sasha to just invite you to share a little bit about why Venus, because I know a lot of the women in this space do still orient towards the moon and to syncing with the seasons and equinox and solstices, but I don't think it's as common to be aware of this Venus cycle. And why would we even choose that? So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful that there's so much more attention to the seasonal rhythms and this return to spirituality, really including what's happening in the earth. Is it the blossoming of spring? Is it the depths of winter? So there's this transformational journey and invitation in the sun's journey from the spring that we're in now, the bursting, the birth. A lot of people say, oh, this is the real new year because we're having equinox, to the fall where things begin to really transform. And we have that shedding that happens to the deep winter and then the rebirth. So we have this cycle in life of birth, transformation that includes death of some kind, and then rebirth. So that life, death, rebirth. And so it's beautiful to be moving with the sun's energy with that invitation seasonally, and we can see it on the land. But there's another cycle between Venus and the sun that actually is a very ancient articulation of the heroine's journey, really working with the visual of Venus in the sky and how she appears bold and bright as morning star for that life energy. And then over about 9 months, about over a human gestation period, she, after having her brightness, her boldness, her, maybe we could say maiden energy, full on, the untested feminine, then she goes on a journey where she's actually meeting up with the moon in the pre-dawn sky and articulating the sense of, I'm the creatress, I'm doing this, and then having experience of trials and tribulations, just like we do with any kind of creative project, and actually visually getting lower and lower and lower in the sky, and then finally disappearing, and then reappearing in the evening sky. So she has this actual initiation where she goes behind the sun, and then she reappears as the evening star. And what's so beautiful about this is we can actually see it with our eyes, we can experience it with our bodies. So you don't need to know any astrology to go out into the east before sunrise and to see her in her boldest, in her brightest, in her blazing glory. That evokes something in your body. That evokes a certain resonance. And that's going to feel different than when she starts to get dimmer and lower. And you begin to have this journey with her movement that actually activates something inside of you, because every ancient culture were following the Venus cycle. This is something that has been forgotten, but when you go back and you look, it was a very well followed cycle, very much woven into the myths and the spirituality of ancient people. So we can really go out and experience it ourselves, which I think there's an empowerment there. And to begin to be with the qualities of fast, slow, bright, dim, high, low. It's something that actually viscerally we can have an experience of. And what that does, it actually connects us to our land in a different way. It connects us to our place in a different way because we're in a relationship with her movement. And I was thinking about that yesterday when I went out and I was looking for her. I haven't had a first viewing yet. I have to go and I have to drive up the ridge so I can see that eastern view. And I was thinking how so much of modern culture is about that moment where we see something beautiful in nature, we drive up, we pile out of our car, and we get back in our car and we go. And it's not that kind of experience because there's a kind of intimacy. There's a way to look for her on the skyline. And right now I'm in that intimacy. When is she going to show up? And there's some patience involved. And there's really tracking, where is she now compared to where is she tomorrow, compared to where is she the next day. And it's so interesting because that cosmic relationship actually reflects our relationship with our own feminine nature, which is ever changing. So when we look at a chart, we look at the static moment in time, this blueprint for our existence here, it gives us so much templating of who we are and our soul becoming. And yet it's a very static moment. It's that point. Whereas when we look at the cycles, then we're in wave consciousness, which is the feminine. So it's really beautiful to know the moment we're born, but it's also important to know the movement. And so that's what's been coming to me so strongly. How do we move with the feminine within ourselves and our own nature, and to really be brave and courageous to be who we truly are? And that's why I love working with women who are in midlife, because there's a natural softening of the conditioning of who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's often that
Absolutely.
call to the deeper journey. So you were saying in your introduction, astrologer, and you don't always know what's happening, but it seems to line up. And that's what I found
Absolutely.
with
And
women.
I just want to share this, Sasha,
Yeah.
with you, because I think I've told you this before when I first started learning from you, that, and I think this is important to say, because I think so many people like think they either really get it or they don't get it. And in terms of astrology, and I think the more and more we're coming into our bodies and connecting with cycles in general, and you mentioned there's the waves and there's the spirals, and we just feel it. The way that I found your work was I was on the beach at night, which happens very rarely because I'm a single mother. And I happened to be on the beach one day at night. And I just looked up in the sky and I was like, what's that? What's that? And I downloaded, I didn't have it at the time, one of those sky apps to just like, I was so curious. It's like, this is worth downloading an app for. And immediately, and then I think a day or two, I came across you and I was like, Venus, of course. I want to know what that is. I just felt it. And from that moment, it's just an orienting framework for me. Even if I haven't been paying close attention to what's happening in terms of super detailed, there's just moments where I'm like, she captures my eye and she's, hey, let's dive in. And even now, my son will come and he's, Mommy, have you seen Venus? It's just, it becomes something that it becomes a living relationship that we have that is, yeah, it's not of the mind. I know you talk about this a lot, and I do too. It's about the heart and leading from the heart. And it's just a string that pulls you and guides you. And so where I have found a lot of other astrology can get really complicated up here, this is just like a really soft but powerful invitation from the heart. Hey, there's something here. Let's look here. I just wanted to share that with people who are like new to it. I know a lot of people in this space follow astrology, but for some it may feel different, or also we're attached, right?
Yes.
But I do my new moon cycle and my full moon cycle. Why would I introduce this other framework that can feel more complicated? So I just wanted to introduce that into the space. And I wanted to invite you to speak a little bit too. So one of the concepts that I find really fascinating about what you share is the concept of the solar feminine. And if you could speak to that a little bit, because I think that also is really powerful in the context of evolutionary leadership and the work that we're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that story. And I find that women who are called to that deeper path have a natural resonance with what's happening in the cycle without knowing it consciously, which is exciting. It's like more feedback that there's something happening in the field. And especially when we're syncing together, when we're moving together, because Venus is very much about we. It's very much about that collaborative space of I've got me, I know who I am, I know my gifts, and now I'm coming into a relationship with you. You know your gifts, and wow, what magic are we going to weave together? So I like to think of Venus in the sky as like this encouraging sister who's rooting us on here on earth. Wow, what a time we were born into. And really rooting for us to come from that deeper place and show up for this moment, being the leaders who we are and being willing to be visible and be willing to risk, because there's always risk in showing up authentically. So I tend not to want to bring forward a lot of there's a thread in women's spirituality that's very much about going back to the old goddess traditions and bringing those goddesses forth and bringing forth those stories. And I did that for a long time, moved through a lot of this in my journey and came to this understanding that the solar feminine is not operating from a place where we're bringing forward history. And the solar feminine, in my view, came in 2012 when Venus eclipsed the sun. And this is very much was in the mythos of people who study Venus, like the Mayan. They felt like now the sun is different. It's feminine now. So that idea of the solar feminine, what does it mean to move from the feminine and yet be radiant? Not so much yin like the moon, but to have a leadership, to be leading, to be moving forward, but from a different place in our being. And so that became a way to talk about it instead of the lunar feminine, the solar feminine. Of course, in some cultures, the lunar is masculine and the solar is already feminine. So much of this is just how we hold things. But there's something that begins to happen when we're willing to let go of our own personal history and reshape those stories, not deny them, but to reframe them as, how did this trial, how did this challenge, how did this experience help me to show up and shine, and to really move through that pain of these underworld experiences that take something away, of loss, of discouragement, and to rise again because we've tapped into something inside of us that is our eternal self, that is our connection with source, that in my view happens through our heart, that connection with our higher self as well as something beyond us. So when we're moving with that, and this wasn't something that came through in the mind, it came through in my experience, it feels less useful to be carrying forward all these myths, all these goddesses, all these other stories, and to really be radically on the cutting edge of now. What does it mean to be a human woman? Do we need to be a goddess? In the Buddhist teachings, you don't want to be a god. That's not actually a realm that is going to get you where you want to go. And not to say that one tradition is right, but I think there's something to that. There's something so powerful in the age of Aquarius. It's about the awakening of humanity. It's not about being something else. And so how do we bring forward that truest, most present time version of ourselves to our lives? And the moon really represents our history and our conditioning and our lineage. And there's nothing the matter with that. It needs to be tended to. And of course, we have a connection with that. But the solar feminine to me is this ability to be holding and transmuting that history and stepping into the new moment, not knowing, connected to the mystery, not needing to rely upon that conditioning, nor being constrained by that conditioning of who am I told I'm supposed to be. But this new, brighter, deeper identity starts to get strengthened when we sync with Venus, when we say yes to the heroine's journey. I hope that answered your question. I'm not sure.
Yes. And I just want to ask you to speak to this because it's deeply part of what you just already spoke to a little bit. But I love how it's connected to the mother principle. So can you speak a little bit about that, the mother principle and the primordial mother and that quality of it? Because I think it's so essential to what we need to anchor into more and more as leaders in these times in the age of Aquarius. It's like this mother principle anchor.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if the sun has this quality of being this primordial life force that is feminine, then we go to mother. That is the mother. And so there's a way that when Venus meets the sun, there's a connection back to that primordial mother energy. And she just did that on March 22nd. And she's still very close. So I'm going out, it's like, is she far enough away that I'm going to be able to see her in her own light? Or is she still diffused in the light of the primordial mother? And so there's a way that when we tap into that mother energy, whether we're biologically mothers or not, although being a biological mother opens up this deep river of love in our hearts that's just so incredible. And yet so many beings have mother hearts. And what does that mean? They're coming from a place of care and connection with others. That's what mothers do. Mothers include everyone. Are you hungry? Do you need a snack? And yet, how can we learn to do that? Not in a self-sacrificing, codependent kind of way, which a lot of our conditioning has taught us we're not important as women. You have to just move over and serve everyone else. This cycle really shows us in the Morning Star how to be boldly who we are and to hold ourselves and to take that responsibility for who we are. And then we get this deep dive in the underworld when she disappears, and we're in this deepening into understanding that source of love is inside of us, and we can tap into that anytime. We can connect with that primordial mother energy when we need love. We can remother ourselves. We can fill up. And then we're not looking for it outside ourselves. We become connected to that source of that caring energy.
I just want to that.
Okay. Yeah, stop me when my Mercury.
For those listening who follow human design, that's my generator coming through. I'm just like, oh yes. Sorry to interrupt you. It was just so deep.
Yeah, because that's the alternative, right? The underworld experience can be very harrowing. And yet there's something raw and real when we've gone through that. And who do we call upon? We call upon that greater source of goodness, whatever we call that. And as I've turned towards that as mother energy, it feels really right for me. It feels like what the world needs right now. And that's not in any way to diminish the masculine energy, which is also very needed. But for me, in that heart space, it's that mother nectar that we learn how to access within our own being whenever we need it. And then we become very different in the way that we live our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the reasons that I created this podcast, is really to focus on how can we be more in the miracle zone, really carried, because for me, it feels like it's a carrying energy, really lifted and carried by the miracle frequency, by this embracing principle that is here to support us in our leadership, to support us to really resource ourselves deeply in exactly what you just spoke about, as opposed to doing it in a way that can lead to burnout. It's no, like, how can we resource even deeper and show up, yes, in a powerful leadership energy, but also radiant and resourced and held and carried. So I love this so much. And I think for me, it really resolved a bit of a discomfort that I had, honestly, around the conversations that I was seeing around feminine leadership. Because for me, it's very much, especially because of the work that I do, is in many ways, it's to help women lead more in their feminine, but also sometimes we swing a little too far. And then I end up, okay, how do we bring back the masculine aspect to really come into this more integrated space? And it really, for me, feels like this energy of the both coming together. And so the solar feminine creates a space that allows both qualities to be there in a way that's really deep and rooted in this mother principle that you spoke about. So I wanted to invite you to speak a little bit about, so we've talked about this cycle, and we talked about right now is a really important moment in the cycle. And I know I've had it on my radar for a while. I always tune into you, and I encourage anybody who's listening to really follow Sasha, and we'll include all her information in the links below, to really get a sense of some of these key milestones that are happening. Because I found in my life, it's so aligned, and we can explore this a little bit. Sasha, I'm happy to give examples so the people who are listening can really get what I'm saying, but there's just certain points in the cycle that are inviting different things. And right now is a really important point in the cycle. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of time to just give us the lowdown of where we've been and where we're going and what we should be really asking ourselves in the next few weeks and into this new cycle that we're coming into for the next 19 months. Like, what's the tea? What do we need to know? What work do we need to be doing?
Yes. Okay.
It's a big question. I know this could
Yeah.
be a 6 month exploration, but
Yeah.
yeah, just so people have an understanding of this is a really beautiful time to come into this Venus wisdom if they haven't been or if they have been. And I know a lot of the women in my space and my clients are already there to dive even deeper.
Yeah. Beautiful. So the first thing I would say is that Venus has 4 basic cycles. So we talked about that, the morning star being the birth, and then the underworld being the initiation or death, and then the evening star being the rebirth. Now is a more mature version that can embody more of our authentic truth of who we are. And then reset, which is the time in between the cycles. So that whole process takes 19 months. And it's not so different from the moon. New moon, waxing, half moon, full moon, waning. It's similar. It's just happening in 19 months instead of 28 days. And one of the reasons that I like this is because it gives us more time with Venus to be in the energy. So right now she's in the sign of Aries, and it's a little bit different because there's a retrograde between the 2 cycles, a 40-ish day retrograde. And so that changes how long she's going to be in Aries. So we're getting an extra dose of Aries for this moment. Then she's
Yay!
then Aries again, because she's moving backwards and forwards from our Earth view. The important piece is that wherever she meets the sun, whatever sign, whatever degree, that's a moment, that's a point that we want to pay attention to for the entire 19 months. Just like in a new moon in Taurus, you're thinking, okay, this whole 28-day period has something to do with what happened on that new moon in Taurus. So we're stretching it out over 19 months. And in some ways, once you get the hang of it, it's not actually that much more complicated. It's a bit more luxurious because you usually get 4 weeks of Venus in a sign to be like, what does that mean that Venus is in Aries? Okay, let me understand the map of that. Let me understand that with my mind. Oh, Aries is initiating fire. So there's going to be a time of boldness and sparking and trailblazing and pioneering kind of energy. And then as she moves through the sign, you can really see, like, how does that feel? How does that land? How does that resonate with you? Whereas the moon is moving every 2.5 days. And so it's very much faster. And I've given up on trying to figure out like what the moon's doing at any given time because I don't have the bandwidth. And there's a little bit of that energy in the astrological world of the frenzy of the next thing coming, and oh my gosh, all the transits. That's all very heady. And so how do we like go out and have an experience on the land in our bodies? And maybe the most important part of that is pay attention to our journey, drop into our deeper heart. What is moving through at the deeper feeling level? So that's the practice. So we could say more about that, but I'm sure your audience is very well attuned and sophisticated and in tuning in to themselves and to giving themselves that time. Put it on the calendar when you get the map. If you're feeling the call, put the dates on the calendar and go out and be with yourself. So
Yeah.
that's the most key moment if you want to move with the cycle. But Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. And so it's only happens every 8 years that Venus and the sun meet in the first sign of the zodiac. What does that mean? It means that this Venus cycle is aligned with the seasonal cycle for us in the Northern Hemisphere. So right now in the burst of spring, they're coming together to make that burst of the seed, this invitation for a heroine's journey to become more Aryan, to become more courageous, to become more truthful, to become more bold, to be willing to go first. And in this time of greater censorship and people getting canceled and all of that's going on, Aries gives no, I don't know if I can swear, but that would be the time for an F-bomb, gives no Fs about it.
Yeah.
Like, but
we're doing it.
There's also an interesting quality there because Venus
Mhm.
is attuned to other. We're not doing it just to do it for ourselves. We're doing it because we're
Exactly.
reading the field and saying, this is a moment where this truth of what I'm experiencing will serve. And it's
Yes.
going to be a little
Hmm.
risky, but I need to say it because I'm the channel for that truth. That's a very,
Yeah, it's got this very sacred warrior kind of energy. We don't always want to do it, but we're willing to because
yeah.
we're called and we're a stand for it. I love that.
Yeah. And you spoke before about the spiral. And so the interesting thing about these cycles is that they repeat every 8 years. So Venus and the sun will meet in the same sign and they create this five-pointed star in the sky. That's one of the reasons that Venus is associated with a five-pointed star, is because we can see oh, this is happening. So this Aries meetup happened 8 years ago. And we can go back and reflect on our lives. And this is a really good time to be in reflection because the themes will repeat in a very interesting way. And wherever Venus and the sun are meeting, that's going to be landing in the same place in your chart every 8 years. So what we just did is we just moved from a Venus and Leo cycle that started in August of 2023, which is also fire. So that's fixed, stabilizing fire. And the invitation there was to really reclaim our creative power as creators. What kind of world do we want to create? How do we want to connect, reconnect, nurture our inner child? Because that part of us knows how to play and knows how to, creation is play, cosmic play. And it's really, especially for midlife women who have time in and have life experience and they've developed their gifts and they know they feel that calling. This is go time. This is go time for bringing whatever medicine we have to the world. And so this whole last cycle was not an easy cycle. We're not living in an easy time. But that thread of like, how did I reclaim more of my creative power? How did I show up to this invitation to be transparent and be who I am, even though there's this very strange thing happening where we live in a culture where we are like in a celebrity kind of dynamic of how am I going to have a following? How am I going to show up with my gifts in a way that it resonates with people? This is all very much Leo kind of energy. This podcast we're having now, it's like we've all had the ability to become the stars of our own show, become these creators, the whole creator economy. So there's something in that about claiming our feminine power and truth in the context, because there's a lot of superficiality around that. The Leo shadow is like the popular mean girls, not good enough, and that
Yeah.
energy. Yeah.
Instead of the inclusion and
Yes.
calling forth to sit around the fire kind of energy. Yeah.
Exactly, which is what a good leader does. A good leader knows that the diversity is only going to bring more of the right people, of the resonant people, is going to bring more richness to the experience. And there's that spirit of service and calling forth other women and also healing this jagged edge of competition that's been a part of our harm in this dominator culture. That's important. And also that mother energy around how we mothering our own inner kid. Are we taking time to nurture that?
Yes. So much of that.
Yeah. So moving from that fire energy into the Aries, it's fire again. So we have a double fire. It's not moving in an order like the zodiac moves in an order. It's a different movement. It's a different move. So we're moving from the fifth sign of the fire sign of the zodiac, Leo, where this incredibly potent Sun Venus invitation came to call forth our power as creators and to also have the ability to discern, because the opposite side of Leo is Aquarius. So anytime we hear Aquarius, if you don't know much about astrology, you're going, oh, okay, we're entering into an era of Aquarius. This is important for this time. And so there's an importance in discernment in what we're creating and how we're creating it, because there's a push to have a certain future. There's like the dystopian version of the movie, and then there's the, even I would say that maybe the utopian has some issues as well. There's all of these imaginations about what humanity is going to be, but what do we want to create on the ground in our world from that deep mother heart energy? That's the gold of this last cycle.
That's so beautiful. And so I just want to invite everyone who is listening, especially in this space right now, because welcome to anybody who's listening in the future. It's still very relevant, but to take the time to reflect on some of these themes that Sasha has just shared. I know I've been doing a lot of that. For me, this has been huge, really working with creativity and themes around. I've been on stage more than ever this last cycle, and all those dates aligned perfectly with key dates in the Venus cycle, which I find fascinating, almost like to the day. So I've had big moments of on stage and being in that energy and more, but also noticing what that has meant for others around me and for relationships, and who wants to see me shine versus who's triggered by it, and how do I relate to that. And I've had so many tests related to, yeah, lots of lessons around that. And then what does that mean for the inner child, who all of a sudden you're shining and you're full self, and then somebody's, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. And they leave and they cut you off. And then you're like, oh, but that hurts a little bit. And so for me, there's been so much of that. Also, it's been a big time for me to work with my music, which was birthed in the cycle and shared from the cycle. So creativity was really big for me in that way too, and different ways of creating and frequencies. And what does that even look like? And how is that even relevant to the work that I do? But I'm still going to do it. So yeah, just an invitation for those listening to really reflect on that. And then Sasha, I know you were about to talk a little bit more about the cycle that we're going into and the Aries energy. And so I'm really excited to hear also about, okay, now that we're cultivating these lessons from this past cycle, what's on the horizon for us to look at, or what's the invitation, so that we can go into that with our, I wanted to say with our eyes open, but really with our hearts open, to be like, oh, wow, okay, this is the next invitation.
Yeah, I love that question. And I think one of the easiest ways to really understand astrology in our bodies is to look at the elements and look at the modes, which all of the signs break down into. So with Leo, we have a fixed fire. And so in the modes, in astrology, it's called initiating, and then fixed, which I like to call stabilizing, because that's just makes more sense to our brains. And then mutable, which I like to call changeable. So there's that life, initiation, something comes to the fullest form it can come to. It comes to completion. It gets stabilized. And then rebirth. That's the mutable. That's the changeable. So we have that pattern. Again, we see these patterns in everything. And so when we think about that stabilizing fire of Leo, that's like gathering around the fire, that flame at the center. It's like the campfire, and then we're performing and singing songs and sharing stories. That might be that energy of self-expression. Whereas initiating fire in Aries, now it's time to go forth. That's movement. That's something new. So it's not that energy of that gathering, stabilizing. We did that. Now it's okay from that journey. Now, how are you going to go forward in a new way? What is it right for you to initiate? Because the power of birth is accelerated because the sun, we're going to be tracking with the sun cycle. So Venus and the sun are meeting in spring, and then she's going to be going down in fall and mirroring that energy. So there's double strength to it because it aligns with the Aries energy. And there's so much happening that I'm not going to speak to in the rest of the astrology around Aries. And a lot of people are talking about that because we have some larger planets that are shifting signs into Aries. And so for me, what came through, and I invite you to sit and contemplate that in your own body, like the place of that gathering around the fire of your own creativity and then what wants to be initiated, it feels like there is a reclamation of what it means, even the sign of Aries, because that has been associated with war, that has been associated with conflict, violence, ruled by Mars. And Mars in all of the myths, and this is one of the reasons I don't bring them forward as if they're the solution for today. In all of the myths from every culture that I know of, with very few exceptions, women are abused and there's violence against women, especially in the Greek and Roman myths. So this idea of Aries is war. We, as the women leaders, get to redefine that from the violence of war to the strength of birth. What are we going to birth?
Wow.
And when you're birthing, you're on a journey and you're essentially alone. You have support, but you're the one doing it. It's a warrior move.
Wow, that's so powerful. It's reminding me of one of the other big things that's been happening in the sky has been this Mars, what Mars was doing so recently. The Mars retrograde, which for me it really affected me in many ways. And I was just having a big, deep exploration around the warriorhood and sacred warrior and what is the sacred warrior and what is it? What is it? What is it? And it was so interesting for me. One of the big gems that I got from that deep exploration was this realization that I was working with warriorhood from the perspective of I'm working with the masculine, and there's something with the masculine that I'm healing. I was really associating it with the masculine energies. And I had this big aha that the original warrior is not the masculine. It's again this primordial mother energy. And even in the myths and the goddess lore, there's when the man can't get it done, then we call in the real, then she comes, yeah, to fight off the demons or whatever. And so it was so fascinating to me to have that aha that, oh, in a way we give our power away by saying, oh, the warrior energy is the masculine energy. Yes. And the original warrior is exactly this, the primordial mother energy, the one who's bringing life through, the one who's the portal between life and death. And that fundamentally shifted something in me. I don't know how it's playing out yet. It's very new, but there was something that really clicked into place in terms of power and mission and leadership and ownership of that. And again, bringing together this dichotomy of the feminine and the masculine and no, there is this integrated place from which both originated. And when we tap into that, what does that mean? What does that mean to lead from there?
I love that. It makes so much sense too, because you have that natal Venus and Aries energy. So this is where that we space becomes so helpful, because when we have women who have something natally, you can speak to it in a different way because it's in your design, it's in your body. And so whatever's coming through, you can speak to it from the inside, that warrior energy. I'm so tuned into the energies that I often get the texture, the invitation of the energies. But then when women speak to it who actually have that, it's like opening up other worlds. So if you have your Venus and Aries natally, this is an especially important cycle for you. Or if you were born in a Venus and Aries cycle, which is another layer, that's the movement of the 19 months that we're all born into a cycle, then this may be particularly personally relevant for you, for your identity. And I think it's so important to honor the power of women right now, because women are being erased in so many ways. I've been reflecting on that, having a teen daughter who's coming of age, going to be 20, that the situation for young women is not any better than it was when I was growing up. It's much worse as far as the violence, what they're exposed to, and how do we convey to the next generation of young women their worth and their value and their power in a culture where we can see it's even harder. So that's something for me that's about the mother energy, is we're looking to the next generation, whether they're our children or not. And that's such a huge service of my heart, is how do we take that wisdom? Because, oh my goodness, for me at 54 years in, and that lived experience, and whoa, so many lessons. And if I had a guide or a mentor or some influence, like, oh, maybe I would have turned left instead of right. And maybe I would have saved myself so much suffering and been strengthened in my gifts earlier, whatever it is, no regrets, but just knowing that, right? That's what mothers do. Then you try to find a way, but oftentimes the actual biological mother might not be the one to help their children. So it's this idea of how do we all become aligned with being in mentorship, being in service in whatever way is right for us in our lives, to the upcoming generations, and to this spirit of care, and to help to convey to them what life can be like when you're not totally plugged into a phone all the time and in a digital reality, which is the shadow of the Aquarian nature. There's something about that, because Aries is the first sign, and there's something youthful about it too. And someone just wrote something on Facebook. I don't remember the whole post. It was really beautiful, but how in many native cultures, the young woman is very sacred, and that protection of her, both her innocence and to reflect her strengths to her, is something for the whole community to do. And I think that if we're creating a culture of care, and we're really talking about regenerative culture, which has become a bit of a buzzword, and so many of these words, so many of these beautiful ideas that I've been dancing with for 25 years of green, right, green businesses and natural building and permaculture and environmental education and nature schools and all of this, have been immersed with that kind of cutting edge Aquarian imagination of what humans can become. There's something about looking into our world and seeing, what does it mean to regenerate my culture? And maybe that's just within your own family. Maybe that's on your team. I think this Venus work could be incredibly potent for those that are working with high performing teams, because it's that place where we care and we weave together, not in competition, but in support of the greatest good. And yeah, just to speak into that there's something to be of service for each of us. Once we know what that leadership is and what we're initiating, it's like we are the new elders. We are the wise ones here. And maybe that word elder isn't so sexy. Maybe it's queen. We're in the queen stage, especially for those in the first midlife transit of about 42 years old. There's that awakening to purpose. And then 52 is the kind of second level of that. But your medicine and your experience is so needed for your world. And there's something for you to begin. There's something for you to initiate. Now, Venus is not going to go direct until April 12th. And before she goes direct, she's going to go back into Pisces. So we have this incredible movement between Aries, the first sign, that boldness, that brightness, that initiation, and Pisces, the final sign of dissolution, where we go back to source. We go back to the, again, cosmic mother energy, the womb, because before the fire, there's the water. How are we born? We're born from the water. We are the waters. So that's going to be an interesting movement. Let me share that exact date so I don't say it wrong. But this is such a time now for contemplation of that leadership. What do I want to begin? So this would be a really good time to be reviewing your feedback from your clients, from what people have said, the impact of your work, to get really clear on what is the unique and powerful solution that you have to offer right now, and how is that being received, and what adjustments might you make to that in order to move forward in a fresh way. Like, we have such a portal into birth right now, into a new birth.
I love that so much. I was pausing because I didn't know if you wanted to share the specific date or not.
Yeah, sorry, I was describing that. So I just first wanted to share when she goes back into Pisces. So she's in Aries right now, and I'm just going to pull this up. Yeah, so coming right up on Thursday, for the day before this podcast, she's going to go back into Pisces. So then there's going to be this journey of the great waters, like being washed with the great water. So I wouldn't be trying to make that initiation yet, that bold new. There's going to be such a beautiful opportunity to deeply feel how we can be of service, and that mother heart that's connected to everyone else, because Pisces is the collective unconscious. We're connected to everyone in Pisces. And Venus is going to be touching upon Neptune, the great dreamer, and the last degree of Pisces before Neptune moves into Aries. And that's been going on since 2012, that background influence of Neptune, the dreamer, being in Pisces, which there's a resonance there with Neptune and Pisces. So it's been very much this dissolving and sometimes confusing, and even can be a way that we're in a fantasy about things. But Venus is going to be moving that, and also be with the North Node, which is this evolutionary, for all of us, the collective assignment for evolution is in Pisces for the next 18 months. And I'm not going to keep going, but then also Saturn is going to make that move too. So there's this whole emphasis on Pisces, the last sign, into Aries, the first sign, not just with Venus, but the way that I hold this as a heroine's journey, I look at all of the astrology in relationship to Venus and the sun's 19-month journey, whereas other astrologers will emphasize other things as being primary. I would say that the resurrection of the sacred feminine energy within us and the ability to lead with care is primary. And so I put that first, and that's the Venus cycle dance with the sun. So it's going to get more watery, more feely before we have that. So she's going to go direct on April 12th. And then there's going to be that turning around and potentially having some new perspectives on the direction that we want to go and how we want to move forward. And it's going to be so connected to our deepest soul level service. There's no way around it at this point. That needs to be the spark of fire that comes from that deepest connection of service, because Pisces is about service. And there's a saying with Pisces, it's serve or suffer, which sounds dramatic, but okay.
Some of us serve and suffer, so at least we get to choose.
There's a sense there of really going deep before we shoot the arrow kind of sense. And that point, 29 degrees Pisces and then 1 degree Aries, it's called the world point. It's the birthing point. And Venus is going over it 3 times in this cycle. So this is a very special cycle, very special cycle. And just to throw down some wildness, there is a incredibly bright astrologer who's written a book, and it's called The Yuga Shift. And he has recalculated the Indian timeframes of yugas. And he has landed on March 25th, today, 2025 is the end of the Kali Yuga. And it was supposed to go for 4,000 more years. But he redesigned with a lot of intelligence and a lot of critical thinking why the old system didn't make sense, because a lot of people didn't think it made sense. And so that's what we're looking at too, the end of the dark age. Also is going down in this cycle.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I just want to invite everybody who's listening to just take a breath, take that all in, take this beautiful, when you're speaking about it, really feeling this returning into the womb for this next level. You mentioned resurrection. That's my vibe. The name of my last album is Resurrected. I'll also include that in the links in case you want to tap into that energy and move it through your body. You can listen to some of the tracks on there too, and really just allow yourself to feel it. I think we can't figure it out with the mind, I think, as we've spoken of. I think we will feel these shifts deeply. We are feeling these shifts deeply, but hopefully what you've shared, Sasha, has helped people put that in a beautiful context and understanding of what that means, not just for what we're experiencing in our lives, but also for our leadership and the point that we are at and the invitation that we are at, and how we can really work with these energies to support us to be in this miracle zone, to be in this evolutionary leadership that we are here to birth into the world in a really powerful way. So Sasha, I'm so grateful for you to come and share this, especially at this time. I feel like everybody should be grabbing you. And I'm really glad that you said yes to be here and to share this wisdom. And I invite everybody to check out Sasha and her work, to follow her work. It's really powerful. It's really shifted my life in the last at least 2 years now. And Sasha, do you want to point the listeners in a direction of where they can learn more, or how to tap more deeply into this wisdom?
Yeah, let me drop one more date.
Yes.
April 30th is when Venus will go back into Aries. So she goes direct on April 12th. And then what is that? That is Beltane. So you see how it's so potent in this cycle. She's going to be in Aries as we have that first cross quarter holiday that is about that fertile energy of creation. So that's going to be very powerful. So if you're doing launches that are big, I know sometimes we can't stop doing anything during these more reflective periods. But right now, especially in this portal time that we're in with Venus retrograde and Mars, not Mars anymore, thank you, Mercury retrograde and the eclipses, it's a very liminal time. So as much as we can, like getting those micro doses of dreaming and imagination and all of that is really helpful, because it's going to be go time, April 30th. Like that is now, boom, the time to start to move forward with whatever we've been dreaming into. So it's like bringing the dream into reality. So I wanted to say that. And then I wanted to say one more thing. But the thing about the empathetic leadership, and something that I want to speak into in a container where there are a lot of women in business, is this whole issue of automation and AI. And I understand that has a place in being helpful, especially if you're a solopreneur and you don't have a team. And there is a whole trend of trying to automate everything, not get on any sales calls. There's this whole kind of glamour around like pushing away your people and just being the star and not really having to interact with them and just having them like buy your stuff. I would propose that is not going to work in a more relational, caring, connected culture that we're creating. And so just to consider that, if you're tempted, it is through the connection. It is through that one-on-one. It is through that caring, because people are taking a lot longer to buy. There's been a lot of disconnects in the coaching realm where people invested in something and it was more fluff than it was substance. And so just to really be that steady beacon of that leadership energy and showing care and actually interacting with people, those are going to be the successful entrepreneurs as we move deeper into the Aquarian age.
Yeah, and teams too. I think it can be easier sometimes to rely on AI to do things more cheaply, more effectively. But also I found, and this might trigger some people, but there's just a bit of I would say a laziness, but also actually a fear to build teams. In other areas, in other sectors, in other industries, I worked in many industries, we're building a mission, we're building a movement, we're building a team. Like that's given. Whereas in this glamorized solopreneur or a personal brand space, it's very obviously, because it's oriented around an individual and the brand, there isn't as much sacredness held and as much respect held for the importance of building a team, which is exactly when we're talking about leading in the age of Aquarius and the mother principle and co-creation. You need to co-create with people, and you need to allow yourself to be supported, and you need to let other people. I always say it's not just you being in your miracle zone, it's building a team, and each person is in their miracle zone, and that's where the creation flourishes. And so I love that you're mentioning this too. So we can do bigger, we can reach farther, but it's very easy now to be tempted to think immediately, how can we speed it up? How can it be AI? How can we keep the cost down? As opposed to, oh, this is an invitation to actually build a team. Like what's coming to me now is like the building of temples. Yes, we used advanced technologies, but it was many people. And I think we're thinking too small. in the things that we're building. And if we think to the bigger vision, there's no way we could do that without these different pillars of support. So thank you
Yeah,
for bringing that
absolutely.
in.
And I wonder how much of that fear of building a team has to do with past wounds between other women, because that is a very sacred relationship when a woman's taking leadership and actually truly being supported by other women and also supporting them in being that service-oriented leader who's using her power well and also not afraid to shine. I feel like there's so much healing in that. So thank you for speaking into that. I think it's going to be teams for the age of Aquarius for sure. So those, and I know you have medicine around that too. So I hope your audience is connecting with you if they need help, because I think we all do.
Teams and collaborations too.
Absolutely.
And how can we support each other instead of tear each other down? Because there's so much that needs to be done. We like ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
I'm sure I'll have some Venus and Aries fire coming out.
Oh my.
Related to that. It's yes, there's the individualism, but what does that mean in a more evolved, mature state? Thank you for that, Sasha.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you want to receive my free gift, sign up. And the beginning of the journey is your Venus sign. And so if you don't know your Venus sign, there's tools in there for you to figure it out. And then I created a free guide that says a lot more about the cycle. It gives you some visuals. You'll get the map for the Venus and Aries cycle where you can just look at it. And even if you don't know anything, you can say, oh, here's these sacred dates when the Venus and the moon meet once a month. And even
get the map, everyone. Get the map. I've been waiting for this map. Like, when is Sasha going to release her map?
Like, we cannot get up every day to watch Venus in the east before dawn. You see the one day when she's meeting that beautiful final crescent sliver of the moon. It's the day to get up and do that. And it's going to prepare you, if you've been orienting to the moon, you know, it's going to really prepare you in a new way to deal with the undercurrents of the stories and the emotions. We know that emotional energy is connected to the moon. Look at what happens on full moons. So it's going to give you that access to that deeper place within that isn't so much about the story anymore. It's that clear heart knowing place just by getting up and tuning in at those times. So get the map, find out your sign. And the thing that is unique about the way that I wrote this guide is I wrote it as a movement. So it's not just, oh, you're a Venus in this or you're a Venus in that. Let's go on a journey. We're going to start with Venus and Aries, and then we're going to move through each of the signs so you can feel that movement in the descriptions of if this was a heroine and we we're describing her journey, how would each of the 12 signs be acting and what would her qualities be? And straight up, if you want to make more money, if you want to have more harmony in your relationships, if you want to have more cohesion, just generally in the way that you're living your life, which is what harmony is, then working with those qualities of your Venus sign and underlining those are really important. If you're a bold Aries, it's going to be important to know, as opposed to being a very curious Gemini Venus. So it will get you started, and then you'll also get the map. And I do deep work 101 with women entrepreneurs who want to actually have either a VIP where they get dropped into their whole complexity and depth of their inner heroine through the Venus design. And then we do a whole half day of planning business with the cosmos. So that's the shorter version. And then I'm also doing 6-month mentorships for those that feel a deep call to really understand how to move with this and integrate it. And then for those that are in the spiritual coaching space, even start to bring the content in to what they're doing, because I will say there's so much superficial content now about the Venus cycle because a lot of women are new to it and they haven't lived through the cycles. And so you can tell when you're reading it from someone who's lived it for over 12 years. So I love to help women leaders to understand it from the inside so they can be actually sharing their deep wisdom, because they're connecting the dots and they're not just parroting something that they heard, because it's going to have more impact. And we need that. We need your unique wisdom to come forth. And that's what this is about. Venus wisdom is about the cosmic forces that bring forth our deepest wisdom to be in service at this time. So please connect if you feel called. I'd love to support you in whatever way I can.
Thank you so much, Sasha. And thank you for helping me be one of those people when I can feel it and have the confidence to speak to it, even though I don't consider myself an astrologer, but through the embodied experience of Venus going through this now. I've been doing it now a few years now. I can immediately feel like, oh, Venus is in Aries. Here we go.
Yeah, and you don't need to be an astrologer. This is why also people
Exactly.
go to the oracles and go to the astrologers to sit with someone in a deep way, to be reflected back at that deep level. Women are just blown away again and again by what their Venus design reveals about them.
So
And like
much.
sitting there naked, right? Being like, wow, okay,
So much.
how are we going to move with that and cultivate that within ourselves and have that support of the cosmic energies and the light to be that and to become the heroine that we need to be to fulfill our sacred mission. That's what this work is about. And it has a lot of tools to deal with the uncomfortable places that transformation always brings us to, because it's that life, initiation, death, and rebirth. And that loop from the death transformation to the rebirth is really important right now, because the whole culture is dying. The whole dominator, the whole structure is dying. So we need those mentors. We need those leaders that can then say, yes, it's all crumbling. And I can feel in my center, I'm being guided by this deeper, loving energy, mother energy, primordial energy of creation. And I'm moving into the next step of the rebirth and the regeneration, the regenerative culture.
Yeah, to actually believe in the new earth rather than just talk about it, like from here. It's like to feel it. Thank you so much, Sasha, for coming.
Such an
Thanks to
honor.
everybody listening. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Miracle Zone podcast. Bye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Miracle Zone. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a transmission. And if today's episode and conversation resonated, leave a review and share it with a fellow visionary leader. In the links, you can access my free Miracle Business Blueprint, the 7-part framework I use with my clients to create a thriving, scalable, and self-sustaining business that gives you more freedom, not less. Plus, you'll receive a guided process to identify where to focus first so you can spend more time leading in your miracle zone right away. Let's build the new as a collective for the collective. Together, we're not just creating miracles, we're living them. Until next time, stay in the miracle zone.